Hi everyone, this is Kelsey Jones. I'm the executive editor at Search Engine Journal, and we are here with our webinar series, Marketing Think Tank. Today we have Krista LaRiviere. She's the co-founder and CEO of G-Shift, and she's going to be talking about search discovery with influencers, off-site content. So I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to let Krista do a quick intro of herself, and then I'm going to jump into some housekeeping.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey. And as Kelsey mentioned, my name is Krista LaRiviere. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at G-Shift. And G-Shift is a web presence analytics platform. We focus on content performance cloud, and our DNA is all about big data for SEO, for social, and for content marketing. And we tie that all together with the tracking of on-site and off-site analytics, which we'll be talking about here today. We have a great team at G-Shift and hundreds of clients all over the world, and we're really bullish about the entire industry and everything digital.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. So a couple housewarming tips now that I'm on the right track and not as flustered. So we live tweet throughout the webinar with the hashtag SEJThinkTank, and I encourage everyone to follow along to do the same. You can also tag Krista and then G-Shift Labs in your tweets as well. All that info is at the bottom of every slide. We're going to be asking 2 poll questions throughout the webinar, so you'll be able to participate, and we're going to give the results at the end of the presentation. And these poll questions are really interesting, so I'm interested to see what the answers will be in the feedback. We're also going to have a Q&A at the end, so if you have a question throughout the webinar, just ask in the questions panel on GoToWebinar, and Danielle, our fabulous features editor, will be keeping track of those and sending them to me. Throughout the webinar as well, we're going to be linking to any resources or tools that Krista mentions, and then we're also going to share those on social media. And then finally, this entire webinar will be recorded, and it's going to be made available through a recap post on Search Engine Journal, and then it's going to be on our YouTube page. You'll also get an email with that link as well that Danielle will send out. So without any further delay, Krista, let's talk about search discovery.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, let's talk about a whole bunch of things. So search discoverability is really at the core of it all, but we're going to cover a handful of different topics today and tie it all together for you. And so the agenda over the next 30 minutes consists of the following topics: the new customer journey and how off-site content plays a major role in your sales funnel today. We're going to talk about the power of ranking off-site content and the benefits to your website and brand awareness. We're going to talk about off-site content distribution, current trends in getting your content out there, and ultimately improving your discoverability. We're going to talk about user-generated content and influencer marketing. And influencer marketing is one of those hot new topics, and we're going to talk about how to leverage each of those. And then we're going to tie it all together with this whole concept of tracking off-site analytics and engagement. And again, as Kelsey mentioned, we'll have some Q&A at the end, and we'll have some polls along the way. And so I wanted to start by just chatting about some of the things that I think about on a daily basis. And sometimes I even lose sleep over this stuff. So not only is G-Shift a vendor in the marketing technology space, and G-Shift is actually represented in this mess of technology vendors that you see here in front of you, but I actually live in your shoes in terms of actually executing and planning digital marketing campaigns. So it's 2016, and I've been in this industry since 1999, believe it or not. And I'd like to think that we're all getting smarter about digital marketing, but digital marketing doesn't really seem to be getting any easier. So there's always different tactics and techniques and tools that come along, and some of them make it to full maturity while others simply fade away and we never hear about them again. But let's face it, digital marketing is confusing. And oftentimes we're left wondering, I know I am, are we actually winning at this? Is our digital web presence actually getting stronger? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? What is the competition doing? Are we winning? And so this Chief MarTech infographic that you see in front of you, you're probably familiar with it. And the newest one by Scott Brinker was published just last month at the MarTech show in San Fran. And there are 2,000 more vendors in it in 2016 compared to 2015. And that's just plain scary. So there are 3,874 vendors now that we as digital marketers are supposed to try to figure out how to use and execute on our digital marketing campaigns. And it's 2,000 more than it was in 2015, and I'm sort of scared to think about what it's going to look like next year. And so you can use, different terms to describe the acts of digital marketing and how we use all these tools, or what I like to term as sort of random acts of digital marketing. And you can, with these tools, you can do things like SEO, you can do search marketing, you can do social media, you can do influencer marketing, and content marketing, and digital marketing. But really at the end of the day, as digital marketers, it's really about audience development, right? Digitally, we're attempting to build our brand, cut through the noise, find our target market, generate marketing qualified leads, and ideally have our sales team close a sale based on our efforts at audience development. So why, after 17 years or so, after the beginning sort of digital marketing time, with all the technologies available and everything that we've learned and how we're getting smarter, are our jobs so complex and chaotic? And it has to do with one really very simple thing. It's because behavior is changing. The behavior of your prospect, the behavior of the person on the web is changing. And so you're probably very familiar with this image. You've probably seen it or variations of it hundreds of times. It's the traditional sales funnel or marketing funnel. And it's linear and it's very organized. And you as a digital marketer creating brand awareness, developing the audience, you have an interested prospect go in the top of the funnel or the side of the funnel, depending on what position it's in, and that prospect progresses along in an organized manner from one predictable stage to the next, all on your website with your sales and marketing team, knowing exactly what's going on at every single stage, and then finally the prospect comes out as a customer, as a closed sale. Well, we all wish it was that easy, right? I wish it was that easy. So here's the reality. There's a new customer journey, and it's because there's new behavior. So the traditional sales funnel has really been completely blown to bits, and it looks more like what's on the right-hand side. That is now the sales funnel. So a big chunk of the digital marketing that you're doing to develop your audience that is being engaged by your prospect is actually happening off of your website. And their journey, your prospect's journey, is very unpredictable and very untrackable. Okay, and so it's not even about the new customer journey anymore, in my opinion. It's about understanding new customer behavior. So the good thing is that we know what's actually causing this behavioral change, and it's two things, and you won't be surprised, you probably already guessed it. It's mobile devices and social media, right? There's now more mobile devices in the world than there are people, and people are engaging with your brand content whenever they want, wherever they want. They're having those micro moments, and that's all great. We know what's happening. But digging into it a little bit more, why are they doing this, right? What's causing them to do this? And it's really about them wanting to inform themselves off of your website. So they used to inform themselves on your website with your own content. That was the good old days. That was like pre-2009. Now they want to inform themselves off of your website with your off-site content, and hopefully you do have off-site content. So the main topic of this webinar is really about off-site content and how the sales funnel is blown to bits, how it's really unpredictable as to how people will go through your funnel and when they're even engaging with your brand to begin with. So we call this new customer behavior the new sales funnel, or the dark funnel, okay? And so today's customers want to educate themselves before coming to your site, or they start on your site and then they go away and they come back, and it's really, really difficult to put it all together. And so there's actually a stat that says that 67 to 90% of your prospect engagement with your brand content is happening off of your website. So to put it another way, if you're measuring only on-site engagement with tools like Google Analytics, right, which you tag your website with to measure on-site engagement, you're really only capturing about 10% to 33% of your prospect's activity. And that to me is just plain disturbing. And so we see this all the time at G-Ship with businesses that we work with and agencies that we work with that work with the businesses. They're all saying, you know, we see someone engage with our website, then we don't hear from them for a month or two, and then they come back and buy. Well, where did they go? And our sales team doesn't know that they're a qualified prospect. They don't know that they've gone out there and informed themselves with off-site content. And so I like to think of it a little bit differently even from that, is that the brand doesn't even own the sales funnel anymore. There's so much stuff happening out there that it's really the customer's sales funnel. It's not your sales funnel. And you had better hope that your brand is in your customer's sales funnel. That's how much control they have. And so it's not so much that your prospects are lost in the dark funnel, it's that the marketers are lost in the dark funnel, okay? And this leads to our agenda topic of really the power of ranking off-site content or having off-site content discoverable by your audience, whether it's in search or social. So discoverable by your audience, your target market, when they're ready to inform themselves and they're ready to buy. And so you know that a trend is really a trend when Google files a patent. A trend is really real when Google files a patent. And so Google did just that. And so they applied for a patent and they were awarded a patent just at the tail end of 2015 for on-site and off-site search ranking results. And you can go and look at the patent yourself, but it's really all about, and what the patent proposes is that not only to change what they've built in PageRank as a factor, but to grow and expand on it and really start looking at off-site content and how it should impact your search results. And so putting an emphasis on building trust, and we know that Google likes the word trust and that your customers like the word trust, so building trust for all of your content should, and I apologize, there's a spelling error there, I'm going to call it out, should become one of the biggest undertakings that you have in 2016. So again, it's real, it's happening, and we know it because Google filed a patent around it. And so how do you make all of this stuff work? And so I know that off-site content is probably not a new concept for you, but how do you sort of piece it all together and thoughtfully put together a campaign? And so I have two examples. One's very simple and one's a little bit more advanced. And so it's all about driving to the final conversion on your website. So give your prospects the opportunity to inform themselves out there with your off-site content, but deliberately create pathways from your off-site content to your on-site conversion point, right? And so over on the left-hand side, you have publish content on a site that your target customer reads. So an industry website, you know, a blog site. Get your content published there, but make sure that there's a path that leads them back to your site. And this sounds really simple and really straightforward, but you'd be surprised at how many people create stranded content with no way for the prospect or the customer to get back to the main website to present that conversion opportunity. It's really, really important. And so the next example is, and so you can do this, right? And we're going to be talking about now more the off-site analytics and how you bring this all together. So a more complex example, so it's more complex, it's more complete and coordinated, and thought's been put into this. It's a content marketing campaign where there are multiple pieces. And when I say multiple, you know, for a content campaign, maybe there's 8 or 10 or 12 pieces of off-site content that's part of the campaign, and all of those off-site pieces of content are driving back to the website for one final conversion point. And so the off-site pieces of content can be multiple blogs that have been written, guest blogs, it can be YouTube videos, it can be a webinar that's been recorded and turned into a SlideShare or YouTube video. You know, really give some thought to the entire content campaign, how it's optimized for keywords, the stage of the sales funnel that it's been created for, but then make sure that external content gets out there, is distributed, so that it all drives back to one final conversion point. And make sure you're tracking it with off-site analytics. And again, we're going to be talking more about that in the upcoming slides. But and some obvious benefits to doing this off-site distribution of content. Obviously, improved discoverability, authentic referral traffic, increased overall brand awareness, and overall enhancement of that digital footprint, right? Increased reach to target audience, building authority within your industry, and yes, expanding that content distribution, which leads us to our next topic, which is really the act of distributing the content off of the website, right? So, you know, along the lines of what I'm already talking about, creating content for your site's not enough. You need additional distribution and amplification using off-site channels. And so over on the left is a methodology that we created here at G-Shift, and many agencies and brands use this, and it really does work. It's called the hierarchy of web presence optimization, and it starts at the bottom with, you know, things that you ought to be doing on a continuous basis and things that you So keyword research, content research, technical fundamentals and foundations, so that standard technical SEO stuff, social fundamentals, that smart content marketing, and I'll just draw your attention over to the very right-hand side of the graphic where you have the percentages, and these numbers represent the amount of time and budget that you really ought to be allocating to each of the tiers. And so content marketing takes up a big portion of the budget and should. That's where a lot of the investment ought to be going within your digital strategy. But then the distribution of the content, I think, is one of the biggest missed opportunities for the content marketing strategy and for really this capturing and playing on the trend of your prospects wanting to engage with your content off of your website. And so content distribution, there are things in there that you'd think of naturally, which is, yes, getting it indexed into the search engines, obviously social media, email, but this is where influencer marketing comes in, right? Influencer marketing is an opportunity to distribute your content into multiple channels where those channels are owned by the influencers who have access to your audience. And so at this point in time, we're going to do the first poll question. And so I'll hand that over to Kelsey to execute the poll. And you see the poll question there in front of you now. So over to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Krista. So the question is, how much of your digital marketing budget do you invest into content distribution? So I'm going to launch that now, and you can vote as I'm going over the answers. So the possible answers are 0%, 10%, 25%, 50%, or more than 50%. So just, give us your best guess as to how much of your budget is being invested into content and distributing that, specifically distributing the content that you're creating. So let's do a couple more seconds so we can get more people in here. And again, the results are going to be launched and shown at the end of Krista's presentation. So we'll be able to see what these answers are at the very end. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. Back to you, Krista.
Awesome. And I just need you, thank you very much for participating in the poll. There's my presentation. Excellent. Great, so let's move on to the concept of, and dive deeper into the concept of influencer marketing and how that plays a role in everything that we're talking about here today. So off-site content, distribution of content, and off-site analytics. So, influencer marketing is one of those sort of newer approaches to the digital marketing strategy. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with, what is influencer marketing, right? So influencer marketing is a tactic of digital where brands are partnering with key industry thought leaders, so they can be big thought leaders or, smaller thought leaders, to really amplify and distribute, there's that word again, their content and their messaging to the influencers' audience, right? And this is done mainly using social channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of this stuff. So who are these influencers, right? And so these folks are credible, authentic, and highly engaged presences who hold a power of influence over their audience based on really the trust that they've built. Another thing that I like to think about in all of this, right? A couple of things, right? Influencers are channels for distribution of brand content, obviously. I think I said that. They have access to your target audience, right? And when you think about that, this is really ultimately all about audience development. There are people out there who have access to your total addressable market. In fact, your total addressable market, everybody who you're ever going to want to sell to has a social profile. They're out there and they're following people. You need to figure out who are the people who have access to your target audience so that you can then engage with those people to help amplify your messaging and distribute your content. And I think it's a really clever approach. And I know we do it here at G-Shift and many of our clients do, and it really, really does work. So adding influencer marketing to your overall marketing mix has many, many benefits that I've already mentioned. It's also sort of a unique power of word of mouth, right? Like the influencers are trusted people that your audience is already following. If you can piggyback on and have them trust your brand, then that's a real benefit. One of the really strong benefits is really the cost effectiveness of it all. So there have been studies, and you can read them, where some organizations report a $6.50 return for every $1 spent on influencer marketing, and that's one of their most engaging marketing tactics right now. And we actually see this working for many of our clients. So if you haven't yet considered it, adding it to your digital marketing mix, you really ought to. But it also is creating a problem, and to the last final point on that slide, it's this offsite challenge. Influencer marketing is actually creating part of the dark funnel problem. As your content gets out there, right, it's out there. How do you track it, right? Because it's just creating more sort of untrackable, it doesn't have to be, but it's creating part of this dark funnel approach. As influencers amplify your brand content and then somebody engages with it, how do you know who was responsible for that? So it's really another reason to use offsite analytics to track that stuff. And I am going to get there and tell you more about that. It's the next topic after influencer marketing. And so I just want to talk briefly about identifying, engaging with influencers. There's actually software that you can use to find influencers or discover influencers, and in fact G-Shift has software that does that. But the maturity of influencer marketing, there's some maturity that still has to take place, and some folks are saying, okay, I want to find an influencer in my industry. And so they find, the movie star or the celebrity influencer that has all kinds of followers, and you can see that over on the left-hand side of the graph. And to me, it's not really about that, right? It's about finding the audience. Again, you hear that word audience. So you're not going to get Jennifer Aniston or whoever to amplify your content because she has access to the entire world. It doesn't work like that. You actually want to find the long tail keyword influencers. And so when you think about keyword research and that you do for SEO or you do for your paid search, you're always trying to find that long tail keyword phrase, right? That's really going to drive engagement, connect with the audience, and generate leads. You want to do the same thing with influencers. And so within our software, anyway, you can take your long tail keyword phrases, find the influencers. They may have a smaller audience, but they have an engaged audience that exactly matches your target market. So it's not about finding the movie star influencers, it's about finding the long tail influencers, and the engagement per capita is really the way to think about it. So I want to make sure that, that you're thinking about that when it comes to influencer marketing. And then once you engage with influencers, it's not just, hey, you want to write a blog post, or you want to create some of that user-generated content for me? No, no, no. It's about forming a relationship with them and getting them to use those long tail keywords or whatever the keywords you're optimizing the content for whatever stage of the sales funnel you're trying to connect with the audience with, but making sure that there's that relationship where they're creating user-generated content for you in a way that's going to ultimately connect with your audience, and providing them with trackable smart URLs or a smart URL system so that you can track the engagement that they are generating for you in your sales funnel, right, and in that dark funnel. And so that leads us to poll question number 2, which Kelsey is going to execute for us, and it has more to do with influencer marketing. So what challenges do you face when running an influencer marketing campaign? Over to you, Kelsey.
Thanks. So I'm going to launch this now. So Krista asked the question, and you can select one of the following: identifying the right influencers, engaging with influencers and getting their attention, monitoring a campaign, measuring a campaign, or I've never run an influencer campaign. So I'll be really interested to see where people are with this webinar. I know for me, I've helped with some influencer campaigns, but I'm always learning more, and great stuff so far, Krista. I've been learning a lot, and I appreciate all the graphs and charts, and I know the audience does too. So wait a couple more seconds just so people can get their votes in. One of the options only has about 3%, so it's really interesting. There's definitely a trend.
Great, I can't wait to see the results.
I know. And that, again, will be at the end at the Q&A. And don't forget, while we're waiting, to ask your questions in the question box or the chat box so Danielle can collect those. Or on the hashtag SDJ Think Tank. All right, I'm going to close the poll and then send that back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks for participating in that poll. And I really can't wait to see the results. So you've created a great content campaign, you've done all your keyword research, you've optimized it, you put together your plan, you've launched an influencer campaign to amplify your message, and you have strong social messaging, you've nailed your offsite distribution. Now what, right? And so this is where we see a lot of people just sort of, hashtag fail. They're missing the opportunity for the offsite analytics, right? And if you aren't setting up your influencers properly with offsite analytics, or even just your own content that you have been able to publish in an offsite environment, then you're really missing the boat. That's the theme of the picture. You're missing the boat. You've invested in all of this, but you really don't know what's going on when prospects are engaging with you off of the site. And again, if you're only using Google Analytics, you're capturing just a very, very small percentage. And so this is where the tracking offsite analytics and engagement comes in. This is where the smart URL system comes in. And G-Shifts is called contextuals. And it really is, we call the world's smartest URL. And you can think of it a couple of different ways. You can think of it as that concept that I mentioned, offsite analytics, but also influencer analytics, right? So which influencer in which channel drove the most engagement back to my sales funnel for my brand, right? Like that's a question that most brands can't answer. And it's so easy to set up when you have a smart URL system that you're working with. And one of the things I like about something like this is that you get to see real-time engagement metrics. And so, I hope there isn't anybody on the call from Google Analytics, but one of my pet peeves about Google Analytics is that the data is very delayed. You sometimes have to wait 2 to 3 to 4 days to get a full view of the engagement metrics for a piece of content, where this system, you can see now, and I oftentimes just sit at my desk and watch the engagement metrics come in for a piece of content. It's pretty fun. And you can have a branded vanity short URL and long-time data storage. And so it allows you to track a piece of content by channel, by influencer, understand the sales funnel, what piece of content by which influencer helped produce the sale, and really ultimately illuminate that dark funnel. And you can even tie it into different lead nurturing systems. And so you're familiar with the concept of lead scoring. A lot of these lead scoring systems like Pardot and Marketo, just to name two, their lead scoring metrics are really, really flawed now because they don't have access to that offsite engagement of content. And with G-Shift, you can, take it to a very advanced level, and you can create conversion paths. So, that example that I showed with multiple pieces of content offsite that are all driving to one conversion point, you can create conversion paths among them and understand where people offsite are falling out of your path and where they're not converting, and ultimately see that in real time. And so this is really, really valuable information in that. I was saying that too, you can link it back into your lead nurturing and lead scoring systems. And so I think that's a really, really big opportunity for marketers to, at least digital marketers, to understand that there is a gap, that there's this trend in offsite, that Google cares about it, that your prospects are wanting to engage in offsite content. They're only coming to your website for that final conversion, likely. And putting all this together can really make a big difference in your digital marketing strategy, how you think about things, and ultimately, hopefully, allow you to win against the competition, right? And so I know that there was a whole lot in this webinar, lots of information. I'm going to leave you with two rather, hopefully, simplistic concepts to think of. So this is the full process. I was like, I better put this into a picture for everybody because that was a lot. And so, we started talking about audience development, and so that's really what this is all about. We want to develop our audience using this offsite content approach because Google does care about it, your customers care about it. We want to take advantage of influencers because influencers have access to our audience, our target market. We want to get influencers creating user-generated content. You can also give them content too. There's a couple of different ways to manage influencer relationships. We want to focus on content distribution. Pay more attention to the amount of time that we're spending distributing content. Don't just write a blog post and put it on your site. That's useless. That's a useless exercise, right? We also have to understand that by doing all of this, we are creating the dark funnel for ourselves. We're creating a more complex dark funnel, but that's okay if we're tracking it all with offsite analytics with a very smart URL system like what I described, and that we want to always try to drive people back to the final conversion point on our website. So that's really important. And so one picture, hopefully I simplified everything that maybe I should have just shown you the picture and then we could have had Q&A. But the picture I think really does sum it up. And then, back to the fact that it's 2016, and I'm sort of sad that it's 2016 and all this stuff is still so difficult. But I do think we are making progress. But if you're wondering about, if you're sitting there, it's like, what is this really all about? Am I winning? Is it any of it working? I've come up with this definition that I think really grounds people in their thought around answering those questions. Am I winning? And so all of this, SEO, social, influencer marketing, it's really about the long-term process of enhancing both the brand's web presence asset and the opportunity for discoverability in search and social throughout the prospect's buying cycle and across any device. And if we can say, like, yeah, that last campaign that I did, yeah, we achieved that, then I think you can sort of chalk one up to the fact that you are winning. But I think that there's we can do more with understanding the offsite engagement. Am I giving my prospects enough offsite content to work with so that they can inform themselves, because that's one of the major trends with mobile devices and with social. And so just final slide, just key takeaways, and then we'll publish those polls and we will do some Q&A. Understand your customer's journey and their behavior. Offsite content will indeed strengthen your brand's web presence, absolutely. Focus on audience development for improved discoverability. Add influencer marketing to your mix. You can do one campaign and see how it goes. Look for those long tail influencers for ultimate audience development, and set up content campaigns to accurately track offsite engagement. Spend more time setting up your campaign. Don't just write the blog post, put it on your site. What is the campaign that this blog post belongs to, and how am I going to get it out there? And that's really a simplistic view of it all. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Kelsey. Well, we're gonna go to Q&A, and so as we just get our Q&A questions organized, maybe Kelsey can go ahead and publish that first poll, and let's see the results. I'm very curious.
Yes, so I'm going to I just showed the results. So the question was, how much of your digital marketing budget do you invest into content distribution? So the majority was about 10%. The next most popular was 25%. Krista, I don't know if is that normal in your experience?
Yeah, those numbers are fairly normal. And I just thought of something. I should have asked another question at the end, like, will you increase your budget into content distribution after listening to this webinar? I would like to know the answer to that.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised with the numbers. I'd love to chat to the 3% who said more than 50. I think that's very interesting. So hopefully I brought some attention to the importance of it. And if you're doing a lot of it, congratulations. And if you think you should do more, that I think you should do more too.
Awesome. Okay, with that, let's go to the second one. So that was, what challenges do you face when running an influencer marketing campaign? So the majority at 45% said that they've never run a campaign. And then the second one, 29%, engaging with influencers and getting their attention, which doesn't surprise me that would be difficult, because I think as influencers become more and more relevant in terms of companies' marketing strategy, it is harder to, be on their radar, so to speak, because it's getting more competitive.
Yeah, and I think, so a couple of comments about those numbers. I'm surprised to see 45%. I'm surprised to see that high of a number, but that's fine. Thanks for letting us know about that. And then it's sort of, now that I see that high of a number, I think, you can't really, monitoring a campaign, measuring a campaign. I mean, if you've never done a campaign, then you're not doing those things either. So maybe the question wasn't completely posed properly, and that's my fault. But I agree that the 29% are engaging with influencers and getting their attention. that is a challenge, and we actually see a lot of spam going on around with that right now, where some brands or some platforms will actually, you know, not very professionally try to interact with influencers and try to get their attention. So we really do need to add the human aspect to it and build a relationship with those influencers so that they can then go and actually represent your brand. And you don't want people representing your brand when you don't even really know them, right? So there is a lot of effort that needs to go into the engagement of the influencers, and it is a challenge, for sure. Thanks
Yeah.
for your answers on that, everyone.
Okay, so I hid the results, so if you want to go back to our closing slide, then we can get started on our Q&A. So we have some really good questions coming in. Super interesting presentation with a lot of info. So let's see here. Ari asked, how do you get influencers to respond and how do you evaluate their pricing? I think that fits in well with the last poll question.
Yeah, so how do you get them to respond and how do you evaluate their pricing? Yeah, so I think it comes down to, so how do you get them to respond? The human aspect to it, right? And I mean, you're not going to solely use a piece of technology to try to interact with them. You're going to pick up the phone and try to call them and create a relationship with them, right? Again, it's that long-term. I'm going to use that long-term term again. It's the human aspect that's going to get them to respond. And then how do you evaluate their pricing? Well, how much would you pay? So first of all, you know, you start to look at the size of their audience, how active they are, how respected they are, so you can actually get a score from an influencer, and we have that. But you also want to factor their price and compare it against any other price that you would pay for a digital marketing campaign, whether it is the amount of money you would spend to create your own piece of content internally or externally, the amount you would pay for a banner ad on an industry website, the amount you would pay for a native advertising campaign, right? They're all comparable and it should make sense. And if it doesn't make sense with how much that influencer wants to charge, then there's a problem. And you could easily say to them, well, look, I could go buy a banner ad for like a quarter of the price. This doesn't make sense, unless they can prove that they're getting engagement. And that's another thing that I think we can start to do with influencer marketing is pay for performance. And you can do that with influencer analytics and with offsite analytics, like a contextual system, like a smart URL system. So you can say, okay, well, I'll pay you for clicks, perhaps. Now, this is stuff that I'm just starting to think about, but with a proper analytics system in place that the influencer is using, you can start to get creative with charge models, for example. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So Tabitha and Timothy asked a similar question that I actually wrote down in my notes as well. So it's basically, they were asking, and then I was also wondering, you know, how do you, what are the steps to find your right, you know, long tail keyword influencers, as you mentioned? I mean, how does someone even get started with finding the right people to target and reach out to?
Yeah. So with Krista lenses on, this is what I preach and this is what we do. And so it's about understanding the content that you have that is performing now. Okay, and so you should know that because you should be tracking all of your content. And so, you know, I can talk on behalf of G-Shift and some of our clients, but we know very well when we've nailed that long tail keyword phrase. It resonates with the audience, we generate leads, we can now take that long tail keyword phrase in the same platform and find the influencers that are talking about on a regular basis that same long tail keyword phrase or variations on that keyword phrase, right? And that's where, you know, so there's the identification. So we now know that if we just turn up the dial on the campaign and amplify our messaging a little bit more with that same long tail keyword phrase, with somebody who's talking about it and people are listening, right? That person is not losing followers because they're talking about that long tail keyword phrase. That's who you want to engage with, build a relationship with. And it's not like you're going to email them and say, hey, can you tweet this? Or, hey, can you write a blog post? I mean, you're building a relationship with them. And it could very well be that it takes a month for them to get a piece of content out to their audience that they believe in, right? But that one piece of content to that audience, and it could be a small audience, but it's a very targeted audience, will have more of an impact on your brand than a paid search ad, for example. Like these are the things you need to look at influencer marketing and the cost and the audience and the available impressions. You need to compare that to something that you're familiar with, like paid search.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Jackie had another good question about, finding these influencers. She was asking if, is it viewed as advertising, and how do you handle the disclosure process? So she's concerned about, making sure that, you're paying for this coverage. What is your process with your clients on that aspect of it?
Yeah, disclosure is a really important topic. Thanks for bringing it up. So remind me what the first part of the question was about advertising?
Is it viewed as advertising? So are influencer campaigns viewed as advertising?
I wouldn't necessarily. I think that's an opinion. My opinion is it's not 100% advertising. It is marketing for sure, and advertising is just it's a subset of marketing. I look at advertising more as a blatant banner ad, right? Something like that. Where this is influencer marketing, in my opinion, it crosses the lines between paid, owned, and earned. It really has this almost identity crisis of, is it owned content, is it earned content, or is it paid content? Just like native advertising, right? It's content, but it's paid content. It is, I consider it, and you can have an owned and earned model of influencer marketing if you're able to engage with the influencer in a much more subtle way, where they actually, without much prying, start to promote your content to their entire audience because they just think your content is awesome. It didn't take any building of a relationship. They built the relationship on their own. Your content is just so valuable for them and for the audience, they want to share it. And so that's definitely unpaid. So you need to think about it like that as well. In fact, I want to do an entire webinar on paid, owned, and earned for influencer marketing and how it just crosses all of those lines. And then for the disclosure piece, yeah, you definitely want to make sure that your influencers are disclosing the fact, especially if they're being paid, that they have been asked to represent the brand. And a lot of influencers do this, but some of them don't either. And some brands really care about it, and some brands really don't care about it. I think it's going to become a hotter and hotter topic throughout 2016 and 17 and 18. And there is software out there, disclosure software, that big brands use to make sure that their influencers are indeed disclosing. And brands can actually be fined. And influencers can actually be fined if indeed they don't indicate that they're representing the brand and that this is not something that they're being paid for it. So you do have to be very careful with that. And know that there can be legal repercussions if it's not done properly.
Yeah, I think it's through the FTC, right, that regulates all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so their website has some good, I think they have a PDF little ebook that talks about all of that. If maybe Danielle can find it, or if you just search FTC blogging guidelines or something like that, I think it shows up. But it's really important to follow those in any type of influencer marketing, whether it's content or social media, anything online. Okay, so we have more questions rolling in. Corey has a couple really good ones. So one that Corey, you have great questions. So this first one he asked, or she, with content marketing initiatives in general, what is the best way to measure short-term ROI for industries with a long buying cycle? They say some executives get discouraged by a lack of hard results data, and so then choose to spend the budget on paid campaigns, like paid search instead.
Yeah, I totally understand the question. So what are the short-term sort of methods what are the methods to measure short-term ROI for an organization that has a very long buying cycle, right? So we invested X into content marketing. We're not going to know if it worked for 24 months because our sales cycle is 24 months.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of an article that was written by one of the guys at Content Marketing World, Joe, and he wrote an article, Stop Trying to Measure the ROI of Content Marketing, and it talks just about this. So send me an email and I'll dig up that article for you. It was really clever, but I know the executives won't like that. So my answer to you is it has to do with engagement metrics. So putting a whole bunch of thought into the content marketing and the campaigns of the content marketing strategy, and again, not just producing all kinds of content, but really thinking through, thoughtfully and strategically, why are we creating this content? What are the themes that we're creating content for? What stage of the sales funnel are we creating the content for? What keywords are in that content that match with that stage of the sales funnel? And is there progression? So if you're investing a whole bunch into content, there should be almost a balloon of new activity at certain stages of the sales funnel, right? Even the dark funnel, because you're tracking everything off-site and on-site. And so do you see that increased amount of activity because of the investment into content marketing? Would be one of the schools of thought. And the other is, I look at a content strategy. I look at content as the core of the entire digital strategy. And once we have that content strategy in place, it's really then just about distributing the content. And I'm a big fan of content distribution, where paid search is really just a place to distribute the content. So you have, your content, and it's a guide and a blog post and a YouTube video and that sort of mix. And yeah, you're getting it out there for owned and earned, but you're also promoting some of that stuff with paid, right? And with the idea and my paid search friends they might not be my friend anymore if they're on the webinar, but with the ultimate goal to decrease the paid search budget once the owned and earned is working for that same content campaign. So it's that constant balance. So you may need to crank up the paid, again, which is just a place to distribute your message, your content, to get them to the content. So I hope that helps with some ideas. But really, the short-term ROI has to come with really granularly tracking engagement metrics for the entire content campaign and being able to compare that to another campaign or the past or a certain stage of the sales funnel is my final answer.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I know it's difficult to try to convince, the people that aren't actually doing the marketing, try to convince them that it's a viable option. One thing that's worked for me in the past when I used to work in-house is showing examples of other companies maybe in our space or of the same size that have been successful with it. That might help as well, so they can see it in action versus you just talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. And if I can just add to that, and by all means, whoever, I think you said it was Scott who asked the question, shoot me an email and we can carry on the conversation. But also, an investment into content marketing, you really can't go wrong. I mean, assuming you're creating smart content and great content and all that stuff, because you're just adding to your digital web presence asset, right? And your web presence is your most valuable asset. Adding content to it and enhancing and expanding the digital footprint, you can't go wrong. It's always going to be there, where a paid search ad goes away, right, after the budget is gone.
Yeah, it's definitely a long-term strategy. We have content on Search Engine Journal that we wrote years ago, and it still is one of our top traffic generating posts. And so if you write content with that in mind, or content on other people's pages, it definitely can help you long term. Danielle wanted you to share, Krista, what your email address was in case people had questions or wanted to follow up like you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure, and I apologize for not doing that. It's just Krista@gshiftlabs.com. And I think I'm the only Krista LaRiviere in the world, so you can find me easily on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's lucky. See, Jones is a really common last name.
Yeah.
you're lucky. Okay, so we're gathering more questions. I forgot to mention before we started the Q&A, our next webinar is actually one I'm presenting on May 4th at 1 p.m., so same time, and it's about creating a galaxy of content through repurposing. So how can you take the content you already have and turn it into other pieces like podcasts, social media posts, things like that. So I'd urge you guys to come to that if you're interested in content marketing. Danielle put the registration link in the chat box, and it's May 4th, so that's Star Wars Day, and so it may be Star Wars themed. So I encourage you guys to come to that. So we have a ton of questions. I appreciate all these coming in. Let's see here. Okay, so Adrian's asking, how do you manage time for these types of marketing elements for smaller clients who may have a smaller budget or just a couple hours to spend, or maybe they have a limited budget? How do you prioritize what you spend your time on?
Yeah, that's a big dilemma. The smaller clients with smaller budgets. You know, I often say before you start going and creating new content, take a look at your existing inventory of content and what can be further optimized, right? So something may be, you know, on page ranking number 11, a piece of content that's ranking number 11 for a keyword phrase that you know really, really matters. If you just optimize it and redistribute it and breathe a little bit of life into it, you're probably better off doing that than sitting down and creating more content is one thing. So optimizing existing inventories of content if they're on a tight budget. The other thing is I think that technical SEO, so now we're not talking about fancy things like influencer marketing, we're talking about boring, awesome things like technical SEO. I think that that's still often overlooked. Like, don't worry about creating any new content if the technical SEO of the web presence sucks, right? And there are we have tools that you can run a website through and find all kinds of things in a matter of seconds. Focus on that first. That's going to help the client way more than investing in a content marketing strategy that they don't have enough budget for. You're not going to be able to make enough of a difference. So get the house in order first and optimize existing inventories of content. Sort of my answers off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's good, really good advice. That kind of relates to a question that Sam was asking. He wanted to know if you had any recommendations in terms of tools or resources for that long tail keyword research. He said he's tried the Google Keyword Planner, SEMrush, but is kind of looking for some other options. Do you have any suggestions for him?
Well, honestly, G-Shift has a platform that does all that stuff, right? So we have multiple sources of keyword research. We just launched a predictive ROI module. And so really, and it doesn't just spit out what keyword phrase you ought to be using for long tail, but it gives you the opportunity to really use the platform and enter many keywords and figure it out and understand competitive insights as well to focus you on what keywords are going to drive the biggest bang for the buck and to show you what happens if you're ranking number 4. What kind of traffic am I going to get if I'm ranked number 4 for this keyword phrase as opposed to 24 or 10, right? So we have a platform that does all that stuff and ties stuff together. And then you can take those long tail keyword phrases that you know are going to work and find the influencers from them.
Gotcha.
That's why
Okay.
I talk about all that. This is why I talk about all this stuff. It's what we do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Adrian has a good question that I've also often struggled with when I've had clients on my own. He said, how do you encourage clients to become engaged in influencer marketing? We find that many small companies are adverse to being hands-on, but they're really the experts that need to be, monitoring or writing the content or being part of the relationship. So how do you kind of encourage clients that they need to be part of this process?
Yeah, and so thinking about small businesses, and I didn't really touch on this at all when I was talking about identifying influencers, right? We often think of movie stars and whatnot as influencers, but think about the small business that's serving a local market and finding the influencers in the local market. And so that's sort of part of the long tail too, right? It's like flowers in Toronto, sort of a poor example of long tail, but finding the local influencers in the local market who have access to, you know, by geography, your audience, and their software, you know, that can help you do that. So influencers by geography, by market, and you know, they may only have an audience of, this is really granular, maybe they have an audience of 100 people, but it's all within the same geographical area as who your flower shop is trying to sell to. And I apologize, I can't even remember what the question is.
It was about finding or convincing the client, so the businesses you're working with, that they need to be a part of the process.
Right.
Because many companies just want to hand it off and say, you do all of it, you know, you do all the marketing, but they're really the ones that have the knowledge.
Yeah.
That you need.
Yeah, and it has to be a relationship between the business and the influencer, right? So if you're asking, let's say you're an agency, you can facilitate it, but it really is, it's just like, forget about the digital world, forget about online. It's a human relationship, and you're asking that person to believe in your brand and your business and to tell their friends, right? And so that has to be at the business level, absolutely. That's I think where the best outcomes are going to come from.
Yeah, I agree, especially if it's a niche industry. It is really helpful just that they're on board. Again, maybe examples, or if you break it down, if it just seems overwhelming, you know, Adrian, maybe you could just give them, you know, a few tasks to do. So, you know, ask them a specific question they can answer, or could you, you know, give some advice on how, on blog posts we could create, things like that, just little micro tasks. I've found that business owners are a lot more willing to do than just, we need your help.
Yep.
Okay, I think we have time for about one more question. There are a few other questions, Krista. We'll send those over to you, and then you can answer them, and we'll give the answers on Twitter with the hashtag SCJ Think Tank. So thank you guys again for so many great questions. Corey was asking, again, what's the best way to measure brand lift, and is that a key component to content marketing?
Brand lift, and so that being the amount of additional engagement, I assume, for that particular.
Yeah, probably, I would think brand visibility, increasing brand awareness. That's what I think of.
Yeah, and so is it, what was the end of the question? It's for content marketing.
Yeah, is that part of a key, is that a key component to content marketing?
Yeah, I absolutely, I know so. And so, I mean, if you're investing into content marketing, you want to take a look at all of the engagement metrics. You know, forget about closed sales for a minute, because that's sort of the toughest one, but you want to take a look at all of the metrics that you can possibly gather to understand if indeed, so that goes back to that question, is it working? Are we winning, right? And so back to the length of the sales cycle too, how do you tell if one piece of content that was created 2 years ago actually drove a sale? And so to understand brand lift, and is brand lift being affected by content marketing, you want to take a look at all of your on-site and off-site engagement metrics. You want to take a look at progression through the sales funnel. You want to take a look at further sharing of content, and did that produce engagement? And all of that, I think, goes back, it does prove brand lift, right? It could take one person recognizing that brand for the second or third time to say, hey, yeah, I remember these guys. It's, you know, I'm in the market for what they're selling and I'm going to buy. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Well, I think that's all we have for Q&A right now. Again, if anybody has any other questions, I'm sure Krista would love to connect with you on email. Again, our email is krista@gshiftlabs.com, and I'll put that in the chat box as well. And we will continue the conversation as needed on our hashtag SCJ Think Tank. So, Krista, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of great information.
Great, thank you. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, please contact me if you have any other questions. I would love to chat.
Sounds good. Well, on behalf of SCJ Marketing Think Tank, this is Kelsey Jones, and thank you for your time.